Antoinette, in the chance that you don't have a quorum, you just can't take any votes. I just started it, so let me see if anybody's joined us. Not yet.
There's coffee and cases in the back.
What?
Like hybrid. I guess I'll just want to zoom in, type in the question.
I'm not sure what you mean.
It would be cool to want to top down the agenda making process.
Right.
So the community to come up with.
Right.
Meetings and.
Well, what do you want to put in?
So just asking people in a full question, like what days work out for you, what time works out.
Oh, I don't know if we set up the proposal.
No, it's fine. I can, if people come in, I can. Chat.
Okay.
So it's like a whole.
Sorry?
Bags. I want one.
Yeah, take as many as you want. I've got like 3,000 in the basement.
Really?
Yeah,
You just thought that was a-
no, giveaways, whatever you want. We have one. Red Gertz, which is a name I've seen before, but I can't place him.
Yeah.
Oh, not that. Gartz. There you can. You're not really run the battery, you get one.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. If you hold it too long, right there.
Or-
It's on. Keep one. Please.
Okay, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Please go ahead and take coffee and pastries that are in the back. This meeting really was, I had in mind to be like interactive in person. I know that there are folks on Zoom. Thanks so much for tuning in tonight. There's some questions that we're going to be facilitating here in the room. Zoom will make sure to facilitate for you all online. So really this meeting is an agenda planning meeting, nothing fancy. I think a lot of people were just concerned with, raised concerns with how meetings in committees are typically ran. They felt like it was really like top down. So this is really just an opportunity to have an open conversation with, you know, members of the community, the committee members, and other board members on what housing issues you see in CB7. And really the takeaways of this meeting are what we should plan around in October, November, and hopefully December. I don't want to stretch it that far, but you know, if we can even just come up with a meeting for next month that we can all get behind, that'll be really helpful. Usually how meetings are sort of scheduled, from my understanding, is that if there is something going on that's a housing issue, I'll get an email from Jeremy or from Julio and saying, okay, you know, so-and-so wants to meet with the community to talk about this concern, and then we'll work and we'll schedule it. Typically in my experience, also being on other committees, it's not really like, these conversations don't really happen. So we're just trying to make sure that we're working more like a committee. So I'm sorry I'm not hooked up with the agenda on here, but just the proposed agenda that I'd like to lay out is for us to just talk about what days work best for us to hold committee meetings, the time, again, for you all to lay out what major housing issues you feel are happening in CB7 currently, and then we can break up into groups like you are and just try to highlight agenda topics that you would like to see. And then we'll try to vote on them as a committee. Well, not vote because we don't have quorum, right? Oh, sorry. I'm just rambling on. But maybe we have quorum. And if we do, then we'll be able to vote on agenda items for the next 2 months. And we can, after all of that, we'll have open discussion. You could raise any concerns that you'd like. And yeah, I think that's all I have. I know that there's a lot going on. Really appreciate you all making the time to be here, especially when there has been like so many hours of meetings this month. But maybe we could just go around really quick, just introduce ourselves. And if you're a member of the committee, if you could just make a point of that, that way we know who's on the committee and who's not. And then after, we'll go ahead and take. So my name is Antonia Martinez and I'm Chair of Housing. I was born and raised in Sunset Park.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gladys Bruno, and I am a member of this committee, and I've been in Sunset Park for the last 34 years.
Hello, my name is Karen Rolnick. I was born in Crown Heights since 99. And I just care a lot about housing because I've been in that situation many times myself when I didn't have a place to go.
Check, check, check. Working too.
Hi, good evening. My name is Sam Sierra. I'm a board member, not a housing committee member, but I have concerns with regards to housing or lack thereof in Sunset Park, and I'm happy to be here.
I'm John Santor. I was born in I was born in Manhattan, but I grew up in Riverdale in the Bronx, and I moved here in 2016. I'm a renter. I have lived in 3 apartments. I've had 2 roommates in each of the 3 apartments. I currently have 2 roommates. Interested in making housing more accessible and affordable for people in the neighborhood.
Hello. So my name is Joseph. I have been in Sunset Park for almost a decade. Um, um, work in housing for the city and leading my master's in political science, also doing housing research.
Hi, everyone. My name is Damien. I'm a member here on the Housing Committee, and I have been born and raised in Sunset Park. And yeah.
Good evening. I'm Maria Roca. I'm not born in Sunset Park, but it feels like I was born in Sunset Park. I've been here for a little over 50 years. Not 50 years, my goodness. I'm making myself so young all of a sudden. And I've seen this neighborhood go through many iterations. Unfortunately, over time, not to the benefit of working people, low income class, no, from the low income to the what used to be low middle class, the lower rungs. All that has gone out the window because all those uh, all that conversation, all that has been reframed. Nobody is who they used to be or fit where they used to fit. So housing was my professional work for many decades when affordable housing meant affordable housing, the real thing. When the federal government was involved, which they're not really, and therein lies many of the problems we're having. And looking for solutions and looking to learn from people of things that maybe I didn't think of, so we can learn from each other and illuminate each other for better times for Sunset Park, for everybody, because it just can't be for any one group, whoever that group is. Everybody has to be able to be stable and feel safe and be able to build on the future, because otherwise none of us are going to be able to enjoy, because that's the way society works. If we're all moving forward, we're all going to do better. And that's what I'm about.
Hello, my name is Elise Shook. I am not a New York native, but I've lived in Brooklyn since 2002 and presently live near the Greenwood Cemetery since 2008. And not a member of the committee, but I care very deeply about housing issues and believe strongly that displacement and gentrification are real things that we need to address strategically and systematically.
My name is Anaya, and this is my first time here, and I lived in Sunset my whole life, and I'm very curious to learn more about the housing issue and what the community board talks about.
So Conrad, oh, sorry. Do you want me?
Oh, no, now it's working. Jeremy, I'm on 41st Street, and then before that I was on 46. I live in a rent stabilized apartment with my family, and yeah, and then I'm part of the housing committee for this year and last year.
Thank you, everyone. And then we have, I believe, one person on the line. Oh, two folks. If you could go ahead and introduce yourselves.
So Conrad Gartz, if you can unmute yourself. Conrad?
Hello?
I see you've unmuted yourself. Can't hear you though.
How's this? No. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry, Conrad, we cannot hear you. He is talking. Conrad, if you can write in the chat, I'd be happy to read. I don't see. Let's try that again, Conrad. Nope.
Hello?
Now we can hear you.
Okay. I've been a resident of Sunset Park for 5 years. I'm just curious about.
He's saying he's having computer trouble. It isn't always us, often us.
Conrad, if you can type into the chat your introduction, and then we can read it here.
Conrad, we cannot hear you, unfortunately. If you can type it into the chat, we'll read it. The person who's just here with a phone number that starts 917-635, you can unmute yourself. The person with just the phone number, 917-635, you can unmute yourself. So Conrad wrote in the chat, but the person who's just on the phone has not unmuted themselves. There's a third. Aaron Keith, you can unmute yourself. Aaron Keith.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, Erin. If you could introduce yourself and mention if you're a member of the committee.
Yes, I'm a member of the committee. I had a last minute obligation and I was not able to attend, but I am attending later than expected.
Okay, that's fine. Do you want to give a quick introduction, a little about yourself?
Sure. I am, my name is Erin Keith. I'm at Sunset Park. I live in Sunset Park. My background is that I'm in architecture. I have always kind of been involved in social and community advocacy, and I have a very much invested interest in housing and land use in Sunset Park. Because I live here. I've been here for about 7 years now. And yeah, I'm here as a person that can contribute. If you have any questions, let me know. I will always have like hardcore deadlines, but if you send me an email, I will always respond within like 4 to 6 hours normally. I'm always on call essentially. So
Thank you so much, Erin. It's gonna, there's some questions that we're going to be asking. And anyone who's called in, if you can just hold a conversation within the chat. Folks are gonna be doing group work essentially in the room, and then you can utilize the chat to hold conversation.
sure, sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
So Erin, since you are a board member, I am going to promote you to a panelist. And then you could control your own microphone. Conrad is also the person who is using the telephone, so he's on twice. But Conrad says his name is Conrad Gartz, and he lives on 41st Street. Sure. So I'm going to call roll now. If you were joining us as a panelist, Erin, please remember to unmute yourself, acknowledge your name, and then mute yourself again. Antoinette Martinez. Thank you. Damian Andrade.
Here.
Thank you. Jalia Bailey. Gladys Bruno. Thank you. Richard Kodor. Moshe Hecht. Jeremy Kaplan. Thank you. Erin Keith.
Here.
Thank you. Erin, you don't count, you're here, but you don't count towards a quorum. Marilyn Melman. Maria Roca. Thank you. Maria, you do not count towards quorum. John Santori. Thank you. John, you do not count towards quorum. Kay Walker. You have 4 board members, committee members who are board members who are committee members who are here. You need 6 for a quorum, so no quorum right now.
So unfortunately, if anyone has any resolution ideas, it's not something that we can vote on. But I think it's safe to say that we can build agendas for the next 2 meetings. All right, so let's get to work. I'm going to ask 3 questions and then take about 10 minutes, and then we'll circle back and we'll do a report back. The first 2 is basically logistical questions. What are the best days to hold committee meetings? Monday through Thursday. The best time to meet, either 6 or 6:30. And then in your opinion, what are major housing issues in CB7 currently? And then Joseph, if you want to sit over here, and John, if you want to join this first table. And the same for folks that are tuned in online.
Hi. If people are talking, we can't hear them. Just as a heads up.
Yeah, that's sort of that's how we're going to be moving forward with this portion of the meeting. So anyone who's joined online can facilitate a conversation using the chat, just answering the following questions. The first 2 are really logistical questions. What are the best days to what are the best days to meet? Either Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then the best time for you to meet for housing committee meetings. We have a start time of either 6 or 6:30. And then the next question is really, what are concerns you feel are currently affecting CB? Do a report back after. Take about 10 minutes to hold this conversation. Oh, yeah. Make sure he's there. Yeah. So do you want? Oh, sorry. Oh. And then I would say. So, and what about you? You. What are your responsibilities? But. Okay. And
on a different why zoning like that.
But it's gonna,
And there's a lot of people never
yeah,
come out of
it's
the
like,
house and then
so
all,
it'll be
when
over
things
the,
were written down and voted on, but all of a sudden they're like,
and so
oh, I
they have
know,
this
well, you
big
know, I just think it's
proposal.
well, it wasn't, you know,
I just sent
this
it
is
to
why
the board, but
people need to know.
it just went through the planning
And
commission
understand
today.
it, so hopefully that's what makes them come.
So this is like already happening,
Interested,
that they're
because
gonna
they-
do a platform for that. And the.
So do you mind,
problem is
so
that
you said the difference between neighborhood-wide rezoning and what? And,
But,
and
you know,
between the neighborhood-wide and,
housing and affordable,
okay.
not like huge high rises, but I do think it is important outside of like the street, but again, it's so close that it's something that, but it's just an example that they're gonna do platform.
The locomotive.
Yeah.
I mean, on top of us, I mean, we have not reacted.
Yeah.
Lots of ways. So we need to, I mean, whatever side of, I know what side I'm on, but we have, people need to know what's coming. And people need to start, so we're not, so there's the neighborhood-wide, there's the city-wide, which is now what's called the city of yes. And for people to understand what that means, it's not what approved right today. And, so that's what, there's a lot of organizers that might need to around that. I would say that 75% of New York should be ready work. Everybody, rich, poor, whatever, don't really know what the city is. And the last one is the single site rezone. How an owner of a property can avoid this and go to the board of standards and appeals, which is it is an obscure little agency that people don't get voted on and be able to change the use of the land of that property and change it without having to go through the loan process or anything. And so people don't know most of the time.
They're looking at that part. Like, I don't think they're gonna replace anything.
Zoning and that.
But that parking, the parking lot that is to the side of the depot that goes all the way back.
Like, what happened here
Yes,
last week?
exactly.
Pretty much still like 7 years.
Yes, exactly. That was one of the places I was
So
thinking.
that,
that there's-
so and one more thing that I think we know more about. That
But yeah, that,
when
I
does
think that's a lot that,
we start? But that's not even shared with the community.
that also
On
the
potential
Alexa
changes
and Marcella said
of land. But we,
kind of delay
community,
planning
by
for that,
the time
trying to.
it's out into the community, and the community board gets wind of it, that's when people use the conversation. Between the landlord and the city planning commission, and they can talk to each other. The proposal from the landlord, what can be done, what, and we are paying for the salary of the people that are that are advising an owner of a property to probably do something that is not good for that block, and so we are paying for that advice. And we, through our taxes, and we don't have those conversations that they have. So the moment that you want from the planning commission, and I know it's a tall order, yeah. And that should be, sorry, that should be public knowledge. Okay. Not only the community,
Okay, for folks on the line, we're gonna do about 5 more minutes of discussion, and then we'll do a report back. Thank you.
people know about these things way before the community does. That's just a fact. And so that communication is happening, right? I walked on, I was on here, near the dram shop here. Right. And Shahana Sharif was having a meeting. I didn't really stay for it, but I felt like she was talking about the era of zoning, and she was kind of saying like, I was not on the city council when this was happening. Right. Right. But that communication is established. Yeah. Yeah. What would you want to see? So you would want for transparency. What would you want?
Transparency within housing, like within development, like more of like the developers have a conversation with like their version of.
Okay, everyone, we're going to circle back now. If you could just take the next 30 seconds to a minute just to finish any lingering conversations. And then if you can select one person from each group to give a report back. All right, thank you, everyone. So we're gonna go ahead and do a quick report back on the key issues that you've all identified, and we're gonna start with folks on the phone, on the Zoom call. So if you, Erin, would you be able just to share some of the concerns that came through on the chat?
Hi. I looked through the proposals, and the things that I thought interested me the most were the community land trust and the possible locations for the affordable housing construction. The reason why I say that is that if we can motivate buyers, developers to certain locations, we can kind of focus their interest in a certain place, in a certain area, and it becomes a little easier to get them to go to those places. And there may be motivations that we can offer to them. My other idea was like, and I would need to do more research on this, but like low grade, the lowest of the grade, landmark status on certain neighborhoods, not buildings, but neighborhoods, so that they have to maintain a certain height, zoning, etc., and not to disincentivize developers or builders or architects or owners, just to kind of maintain a status level that, you know, would be maintained over 30 years, 50 years. instead of 10. My only concern is that builders like to move and move quickly. And once they see the shiny keys, they seem to go to the shiny keys very quickly, and then everything around that very quickly. So, yeah, I would need to research that. I would want to research that before suggesting that, like, overall, but it's something that I'm putting out there that I've had experience with even the basic level, which is barely any maintain of landmark status in a neighborhood, which just means context overall. It should be maintained via landmarks. I don't know. It's something that I would put out there for the group to discuss, obviously.
Thank you, Erin. And were there any other ideas that came out from the chat from other folks on the line? It's only Erin? Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Erin. I'm sorry you couldn't be here in person. In the back, is there someone who can just read off the concerns that you all had? Is there a mic back there? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Damien's voice is better than mine, but we had a wonderful, rich conversation in our group. A couple of things came up. Maria had raised some great points about an educational or informational need around understanding land use dynamics and how they work, how the rules work. For example, when do potential land use changes begin? And also understanding, the different types of rezonings, how those dynamics work. The city of yes, the citywide rezonings versus single site rezonings versus neighborhood-wide rezonings. So that was kind of like a educational, informational need that this idea that the public should be more informed about how land use strategy works. Tenant organizing, that's something that I'm personally interested in. I think, more information about that. Rent guideline stabilization, how that works. 4th Avenue and 50th Street, was that a particular building, Damien? Okay. Then there was a big conversation about the importance of transparency in terms of communication between CB7 leadership and when developers may be in connection with CB representatives in leadership and CB7.
Kindly use the microphone. I can't hear.
Oh.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So to the point of transparency, and this is for housing or for anything that comes before a city agency. And Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, community boards are city agencies of a sort. What are, because
We're city agencies.
Yeah,
I don't know what you mean of a sort.
No, I don't know, because I never know. Okay, so let's go with, they are city agents. They're city agencies. That conversations that affect a neighborhood, the city, whether it be with from developers or anyone representing developers, for changes having to do with housing, land use, and housing begins with land use. So you can't separate land use and housing. That those conversations need to be reported to the public. When a developer or their representative goes and knocks on the door of a community board or the city planning commission, the public needs to be notified. And so that we know we're paying for the salaries of people who are meeting with those, what do you call it, developers, and not to find out months later, years later, that there's been all these conversations and arrangements and, well, dealings and the community has no idea of what's going on, but it's been going on already. So I believe that that's what I meant, and I'm not sure if everybody at the table agrees with that.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and let's see, Damien, you wrote, do you want to speak to the last couple?
Hey y'all. So I'm a political science major and I'm actually taking my capstone this semester. And I found something very interesting, a model that I was reading about, and I was like, wow, this is very great. I think we should have it. We should adopt it, which is participating. We have it, participating budgeting, or what is it? Participate. Yeah, that we're able to like vote on specific projects and etc. But so what I found it interesting is that Brazil was actually the first one to like institute something like that before the United States, and all the other countries started picking up. And it's crazy because they started like their little mini pilots and then they grew it bigger, and they have more of a bigger discretionary funding to be able to use. So the public actually has the ability to control where our funding is going. And throughout the years, since I believe 2002 to 2004 and so on, they managed to like lower their mortality rate, lower poverty, due to the fact that the citizens and the neighborhoods were able to vote on specific projects and specific funding for their community needs. I know they like took took months for meetings, over like 200 something meetings, and it's called the EPG model, which is the Empowered Participatory Governance, which allows us, like for instance, like CB7 or like any neighborhoods, to form their own little governance and be able to vote on specific projects, and those projects are actually gets funded. What I was reading is that throughout 2002 or 2003, that these meetings happened, they had more than 250 meetings from like local for like 43 neighborhoods, and it gets sent to like it gets included into the state's how do I say, like at the end of the year budgeting, like for instance, if Sunset Park were to establish its own neighborhood governance, and we vote on like, you know, our participating budgeting, we actually send that recommendations to the state, and the state agencies and the state, like I would say representatives will include that into the state's funding. So when they pass that bill, we will actually get that funding designated to us. So I was thinking maybe looking in ways that we could promote this type of model, or like looking in ways that we could have that model here and make for housing, like in a way, like we're able to vote on projects if we want it or not, and how much we want it, and use the public resources, like our taxes. I mean, I think that my tax should be going into funding housing and stuff like that. That's how I see my taxes. But yeah.
So just to kind of go on the transparency point, like I think one potential intervention is maybe having some, maybe we could, as the housing committee, you guys could kind of consider a resolution or something, you know, that if a developer is going to have any kind of conversation with leadership in CB7, that they are required to communicate that information to the community. So that's a potential idea. You know, that's the kind of something that you can consider as to get at that the need for transparency, or you know.
Unfortunately, we don't have quorum, but any board member is free to raise any resolution at the next meeting in October. So if anyone's interested in that. Thank you so much. And then the next table.
I ask, does that happen with, do developers come to the board outside of the Euler process and have conversations with the board about issues? Is that what you're specifically raising? And has that happened before? Can anybody speak to that, where
Why would a developer come before the board if they don't need our support on something? They do not.
Put it to was the opportunity for a developer or their representative to access the community board leadership. And this is not just, we're not just talking CB7 because this is happening all over the city. And be able to have time and a one-on-one conversation or two-on-one conversation about a potential proposal that would lead to a rezoning, and consider that something that can be done casually without it, rather than it being a formal and reportable event. So that it's not just the two people at that table having that conversation, but rather because it is the business of the community that the community board represents, that it be shared with the rest of the board and the community.
100%.
Regardless of whether the community board has a binding vote or is just an advisory vote.
Thank you, Maria. And just to help move things along, if you have any questions that require discussion, we're reserving time for an open discussion portion, but just wanna, it's already 7 o'clock and we don't even know what we're meeting about next month. So just wanna
Hi.
mention that. I'm sorry, Erin. And then just another quick point. So what Maria had mentioned, is it supposed to happen? No, but do developers reach out to committee members backhandedly? Yes, it has happened. It's happened to me. It's not supposed to happen. Should there be transparency? I think so. So just want to raise that point. And then for John, if you can speak to
The
the
idea.
concerns that were raised.
Yeah, Karen is going to speak to that. I think it happened with Totem also. There were conversations with Totem with the board before people were aware that was happening.
So on our list, we have obviously more affordable units, but they should also include middle incomes because we need, nurses and teachers and things in our community. And that many of our buildings have been taken out by fires recently, and what's happening with those, and can we utilize those for affordable housing? Preserve rent stabilized buildings, and to be in touch with Jeremy, this is your idea. Maybe you can elaborate more on it, but religious institutions with open space like the St. Rocco's, and there's a few others. So the rail yard, this is my thing. The rail yard is a huge space, and it's not unheard of to deck over rail yards and build housing above them. And we have a huge asset here in Sunset Park, and we should utilize it for housing. And I would like to add that I think it was in the 40s or something, we had thousands and thousands of the government built units under the Mitchell-Lama program for middle income people, and they're still here today. So I think that, we have a governor who seems a little open to housing issues. We have someone running for president who's making affordable housing part of their plank that they're running on. And I think the time might be ripe for the government to build affordable housing, and we should be ready here at CB7. What else is here? Oh,
And then John was talking about the need for education and understanding around the economics of financing, building housing, and so I don't know, John, if you were specifically implying like we should do educational, forums, but as a way for the board to sort of demystify the process and what happens. I think the interesting thing too is like that there's a number of elements of like how various affordable housing, models get funded. And we talked last year about CLTs, but there are other models as well. So maybe we can expand upon that. But John was saying the deep need for us to use the committee as a way to educate the community on these issues and make it more real as to like how housing gets built and what are the models that are used. How is it really funded by the government, or what tax credits, what tax breaks and stuff are used.
Just briefly, building housing is a business transaction, among other things. And I think the board is often asked, and the community is often asked, to accept or reject a business proposal without any underlying economics of what goes into that proposal. Totem said that it's building 180 units for 180 units for $140 million, just to give one example. So if that's how much a unit of housing costs, and if people say we should have 5,000 new units of housing in this community, then you can have some sort of estimate of how much money that would cost. It would cost a lot of money, but are there alternatives to doing that? Unless we can share that kind of information and build up that knowledge, including from the Fifth Avenue Committee and existing developers who are building affordable housing, I just think we're perennially, every time we get a proposal, we're in the dark. We don't know how much it costs. We don't know the calculations that went into it, the sizes, the materials, the amenities. How could that have changed the project? And developers never share this information. As far as any conversation that I've been in, they don't share that information. So educating the public on the point is a way to make this a much more empowering discussion.
Thank you so much. Are there any other points that you, okay. Thank you. Erin, I see that your hand is raised. We're just gonna go ahead and, oh, you put your hand down. Okay,
For us, some of the issues we talked upon, ability, I think housing affordability is in everyone's mind. Homelessness, particularly visibility homelessness, we feel like they're just the community is more visible in their neighborhood more so than before. Just issues with food insecurity, tagging onto that transportation, how that relates to employment and housing, and with ability that some folks might have. Overcrowding is something that we are aware in the neighborhood. Oh yeah, hard it is to get an apartment for sure. Like deposit and brokers fee, all of that. Fires, we know that there have been a lot of fires in recently. Cost of rent. Right, elevators in a building, particularly how few they are neighborhood, yet we have a lot of neighborhood, a lot of people with disabilities. Credit scores. Yeah. No, yeah, affordability again. Tenant protection education, just I think that go in line with this idea of just educating the public about their rights, but also just like housing process overall. Concerns with hotel conversions into shelters. Oh yeah, how do we stop house of right development? Conversions of housing into commercial spaces, deregulation of rent control apartments, and how do we re-regulate? And the last one I just added was working with nonprofit or faith-based developers to build more affordable housing.
so if you all could give yourself a round of applause. I know we haven't met in a while and these are a lot of issues. So it's really good just to talk through it and to meet. Okay. Erin, why don't you go ahead?
Hi. I've heard a lot of incredibly inspiring elements of these conversations where you guys have talked about educating the larger public on everything from land use regulations to cost analysis and like life quality analysis. My background is in architecture. I work a lot of hours, but I am so incredibly inspired. And obviously, I like joining the housing committee is very important to me, especially as I live in Sunset Park. So should we need to create like a PowerPoint presentation for the community or any kind of like, press release, I don't know, like slideshow, something. I can't promise more than what I can do, but I would be absolutely available to do that in whatever capacity that I can. Facts and numbers, I
Thank you,
would
Erin.
absolutely do that.
Sorry, not to cut you off, but as a member of committee, yeah, we're gonna expect for everyone to hold their weight and to contribute. So really appreciate that. Thank you. And Pat, I see that you're on the line. Did you wanna just chime in and share some housing concerns that are happening in CB7 right now that you see? If not, it's fine. I just want to acknowledge that you're on the line.
Hi, guys. I'm actually listening today
Okay.
because I see it's a lot of few new faces. And one thing I do want to say, yes, I agree with transparency. You saw what happened at last month's board meeting, and I would hope that that doesn't happen again. We need to know from our district manager and our chair of informal and as well as formal meetings that go on, because it's the little things that people don't realize that may not be important to them, but it's important to the person they met with. And as we can see, Arrow Linen took that as a formal meeting when they documented it in their letter to the board. So that's pretty much. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, so I'm just gonna be very honest. There's a lot of going on in the neighborhood, right? And this committee can only do so much. There are limitations. Everyone has jobs. They're volunteering their time here. The next question is just realistically, what are you able to commit? Because we're meeting now as, especially for those who are committee members. I know like these meetings are open to the public. People are gonna pop in and out, but I don't want folks to raise something for other people to carry the weight of. So let's just be realistic. What is something that's tangible that we can work on in October, November? I'm gonna say pick your top three that we can do just from hearing conversations in the room. If it's something new, if it's and then also like if it's a newsletter that we can put together and disseminate out to the community. Just think, if you want to think outside the box, that's fine. But what are tangible things that we can implement in October, November, December together as a group? And yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and leave that for discussion. And then John, if you could take the mic to ask your question.
Okay, my suggestion would be, so the committee can meet once per, well, every meeting it would presumably be about one issue, right? If we meet as a committee, it would be about one issue.
This question is really broad. So I just want folks to pick, we all had conversations, we all did report backs, we heard from each other. There's a lot going on in the neighborhood. What are our top three concerns that you feel that we can meet about that are realistic within the next 3 months? Like if you have a point of contact that we can reach out to, what are tangible things that we can commit to in October, November, December? And if folks feel that we shouldn't have one-off meetings, if we need to have another conversation and build off of that, that's fine. I guess I want to bring it back to you, John, but I also don't want to derail things.
Sure.
For my expectation for this meeting was to come up with an agenda for, again, for October, November, December. If folks feel like, nah, like I don't want to meet, I don't want to have meetings, I instead want the committee to work on a project or to do something, like that's fine. Just jot that down. There's more of a brainstorming session to see like, what are your expectations for this committee until December? If it's having meetings over the next few months, that's fine. If it's working on a particular project, that's fine. It's sort of just a free-for-all, just to see, gauge where we're at, but also just be realistic with your commitment of time, because, you know, we all have things going on, and, you know, if we want to be realistic about what we want to do, we want to actually make sure it's something that we can accomplish. And then I'll take a question from John, then Maria.
It just, my suggestion is, because I think that we could differentiate between a thing that the committee meets on and ongoing things that people are working on, so that, you know, you could have a particular agenda item set for a month, but then meanwhile, if there are 5 other things that people are interested in, people could volunteer to take one of those and try to move it forward, and then report back as they go to the committee, so that we're making progress on multiple things at the same time, even if we're only calendaring one thing for a particular month.
That's something that can be jotted down, and if folks have the commitment and the time to work on things, then yeah, fine, that's totally okay. But I just want people to know, like, what they're signing up for, because, you know, with any group project, there's always, you know, that one person who shoulders the weight, and we want things to actually happen. So yeah, if that's something that comes out of these conversations, completely fine. And then Maria?
As far as the educational, informational uh, uh, thoughts that we had at the beginning, all of that already exists. It's not like we're starting out with a blank page. As to, it exists from different organizations and different places in multiple languages, because we have to remember that this is a very diverse community, and that we should also always try very hard to include as many members of this community as possible across whatever whether it's racial, ethnic, income, so that people are aware of what's going on. It already exists. I will start tomorrow and pick up a phone and call those folks who I know that have prepared materials on this in as many, and ask if the languages that are available, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And there are other people here who have connections in the housing/land use world. You cannot do housing effectively without understanding land use. They are connected at the hip. So so I'll start with that, but it is not a one-person job. Just to gather that information and have like a library, you know, library doesn't have to be a bookcase with books, you know, of what we can draw from and share with the community. That's one point. The other point in that educational is that we have to bring in our young people in this neighborhood. The high schools and the junior high schools need to be at the table. We need to talk to our teachers so that they can make it a project that you learn about. Okay, hello. Talking about here, they're inheriting all of this. Whatever decisions we're making, this is going, if we create problems, they're going to have to deal with those problems like we are dealing with the problems of generations before, and my generation included. Very bad decisions were made in this city by my generation. And here we are, and I'm still that many years later, I'm still dealing with it. And so we need more young people at the table with their understanding, to educate them with their questions, with their fears, because they are afraid. They don't know why they're afraid, because they know that something is not right.
Thank you, Maria. We'll do a report back, but so right now, 7:15, we'll allocate 10 minutes. I know that's probably not enough time, but it's just the start of many conversations. Let's just brainstorm what are some tangible things we could do this fall. And then
there were 3 points of discussion that you had the tables want to report back on, and we had great discussion, a lot of great recommendations. However, we haven't agreed on a date and time that we're going to meet. Okay, well, just to share this table, there was flexibility Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, 6 p.m. The reason I mentioned that, it would be great if we can leave here with an agreement, and that would perhaps allow the chair of the committee to schedule the next meeting, because then we'd leave here with the date.
I appreciate that. And then just for complete transparency, if there's a lot of other committees, so we'll do our best to accommodate those dates. I know, and then sometimes we've scheduled meetings on particular dates and we're asked by another committee to bump it. So we'll do our best to hold meetings on Tuesdays or Wednesdays and then to bump it up to 6 o'clock. So we've already been here for an hour, 15 minutes. So want to be respectful of people's time. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started?
Antoinette, what time did the meeting start today?
We started at 6 o'clock.
I apologize. I thought it was 6:30.
No,
Okay.
it's okay. It's fine.
Thank you.
I don't know. That's something that
Do we want to include flood?
Yeah, maybe.
Because
But
we have a big
actually
problems with, and the end, what do you call it, the fire department is the one that always has to respond and has to save people from this, and, you know.
And there's the last time I got my taxes done in an elected office, and there's pamphlets there, fire safety.
Right. In Portland, everything should be in Portland.
Yeah, there's fire safety pamphlets that are at elected office. I don't know if they're still there, but there are. Maybe we can have
Okay. They already bought it, no? From the, yeah. Yeah, the new landlord, one of the new landlords in the neighborhood. We're not gonna get it, but anything, let's see if they respond, let's see if they show up, let's see what they say. Do not expect them to ask them a question, you know.
Like representative of housing
Well, principals. Because the representative could be the lower rung of that organization, and they're gonna send the Latino, and they're gonna send the Latino, you know, the Latino young woman or young man, we've seen this before. So see, we hired one of you folks. You know, or the Asian young person.
The purpose
Oh,
would be
see,
for them to kind of
you're-
present on their
we
plan for
respect
that,
the,
right?
you know, like, oh God, not again, you know? And I'm a Latina, so I know when I say, yeah, right. And this is never, and
This person has never been to date, and we've seen a lot of that. Somebody who's one of the principals of the company. It is someone who is a secretary or whatever, and the face, so that the community goes, oh, one of us is in there. Please, how many times? But that's their game, and we see it again and again and again. And did you? I don't know. You read? Could you send out that article from the? Is it behind a paywall? Probably. I don't know.
It's behind the paywall, but if, like, for instance, if you have an iPhone and you go like this, and you click this real fast.
Oh, I don't know what you're clicking. I do have an iPhone.
Yeah. So there's this little thing. Like,
Right. Yeah.
And you click really fast. Every day I hear like. You're supposed to. It's like a way to,
To circumvent the paywall. Okay. Just go back until.
Yeah, and then you see get behind the paywall because it
Like
turns
it's
it into black and white. So there's a paywall.
Oh,
behind
I
it.
didn't see exactly. Okay, I'll play with it.
Yeah. So once you like search up, like once you click
What is
this,
it? What is the title of the Sterling Group?
SterlingGroup.com, the Commercial Observer.
Okay. Let me see. Okay, so continue while I do this.
But,
and see what
I've heard
I can-
that at other meetings, that.
See, that's why I like to hang out with young people. They know all the tricks of the trade.
I learned it from my
Yeah.
significant other. He told me how to.
Yeah, that's how you learn. That's how you learn. Somebody knows something and you pass it on, Okay, and the name of this group is, what is it? The what else?
Sterling Group.
Sterling, wow. I know that blog, I'm already somebody else's, that they could own other properties. That's just what they're buying now. Oh, there's a lot of money behind it that we don't even know.
So Maria.
Yes.
So like for instance, apartment building in Sunset Park has traded hands for $20 million. The property is addressed at 437, 438, 442, 445, 446, 449, and 450, 61st Street, all stand 4 stories tall and contain more than 120 apartments.
Rent stabilized apartments, and
They're
those
all
are,
rent
they're
stabilized
all rent
but now
stabilized.
they.
And it's probably an LLC, so.
It's about 32.5 in financing from Virginia-based
Oh, God.
investment company.
You know who else is Virginia State Real Estate? The people from Industry City, Jamestown.
So-
See, there's a lot of digging to be done here because.
So, not to
Okay.
interrupt, but let's see if we can make this point more tangible. So your concern on climate crisis, environmental impact on housing.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
How would that be more tangible?
So, like, what are the areas of CB7 that already compromised because of climate crisis? The most obvious one is west of Third. West of Third is on a plain, on a flood. There should not be there. So there ought to be, and that was noted in the 197A plan, there's wording to that people should actually be bought, residential, be bought out from west of Third, bring them up the hill, and then move commercial and industrial businesses that are up the hill and bring them down there and do a swap. It's called a swap. So people are not in danger in the middle of the night or whatever, when the flood comes up, how do you evacuate people? Businesses can be helped to build, as they move down there, build 1 story up, put all their mechanicals above, like at least for the next 30 years.
Like a presentation on the flood zoning.
Right. Oh, and we can get people to do that. Yeah. But anything the environmental impact, right? And the other thing is that most people don't even think about that is the infrastructure of this neighborhood. What can we support with the infrastructure that we have in clean water, sewer, electric grid, and all of that? What can we support with as things are being built?
Not that we're gonna build up and then more problems are gonna have, and there's where's the money for the infrastructure that requires that we dig our streets, that we, so we're doing it as backward,
Maybe,
but
maybe like maybe there.
the
of
maps
having
and the
them
maps exist.
come here, do a presentation to, to inform the public
Right.
about the, like you said, the flood.
Yeah, well, the information exists. The way to find that information, people don't know sometimes how to do the research. Is there what is going, what is passing under your building and uh, under a street? That once you start digging and once you start moving things around, you're gonna find that you have a river under a street, and all of a sudden the street every so often, and that's and those sinkholes are right above a stream that ran under that street that was filled 200 years ago, 300, so, and that is the reality of this because of the ridge, the height, from Staten Island all the way across Bay Ridge, all the way to Sunset Park, to the cemetery, and then ends up at the ridge ends up at 23rd Street. That is the ice age, and there were rivers going down to the water, and that is documented. But it is not taught in our schools. You find out about it when you happen to be next to somebody who knows a little bit about it, and you hear it. But that should be community knowledge because that all.
All right, folks, we're gonna circle back in another minute. If you can just identify someone to do the report back. Thank you.
Oh no, and he's not fighting back.
No, the one that you go to. I'm very bad at singing, but I just want to drink myself a nice Long Island iced tea and call it a day.
Okay, everyone, we're gonna circle back. Thank you. We're gonna start with folks on the line. Erin, Erin signed off. Okay, awesome. Could we read some of what she shared? Thank you, Jeremy.
Top three things I can volunteer: putting together PowerPoint presentation. I could do background research on any property that might be needed to check any zoning, housing, etc. I want the committee to focus on one project that means the most to community. I'm here for it if we have that focus. I'm not sure what this was for, but yes, absolutely. Multiple language versions should definitely be included. Yes, yes, agreed. I'm not good with emojis, so whatever this means, agreed. Bring youth groups in early and have their voices as an innovative voice. Committee meetings being grouped with other CB7 dates makes it easier. I could provide some AIA housing-friendly lectures if y'all are interested. They are probably boring, but they provide some interesting background info to New York housing in general.
Thank you, Jeremy. Okay. And then the folks in the back table, if you could share, and then also if you can share the dates and times that work best for people in your table.
Yeah, okay, so I guess the times that are best for us, I think we're pretty much flexible throughout the week around 6:30. For me personally, I just need at least 2 weeks in advance, so I could request off work because I am like on call, like basically, retail worker, sadly. But our three main topics, I guess, that we want to dive into, is like give presentations or like list like presentations on climate crisis and the environment impacts on housing in the district. Maybe give a invite organizations to give a presentation about climate resiliency and like where we should build housing, where we shouldn't build housing, to like really give that protection for people. Because I believe there's certain places in New York City that they're building housing on flood zones, and it makes no sense when people are going to put their lives in danger if there's um, a extreme bad weather event. The other one would be the issue on fire, to maybe invite the FDNY, and we could kind of coordinate that as us, as our group, to give a presentation to the board on fire safety, like what to do, what not to do if there's a fire in your house, how to prevent it, what things you should put out the fire and what things you should not put on fire, because some people might think the basic water on something and then it goes crazy. Yeah, what you should store, what should not. So we're like kind of gonna the most two things are like presentations, and the third one is basically what we could help with, if anything. Oh, perfect. Oh, look at that, y'all. We got it. We got it live. Manifest it. Big brain. Um, my brain go crazy. I manifest the future.
I think because we've had so many fires in apartments, tenants' rights about if their apartment goes through a fire, especially for rent stabilized. I think what we've seen in emergencies is like tenants are scrambling to figure out. So I think getting that information out, because it's a pretty complicated procedure, but they can preserve their right to return. And I think we've seen, a number of rent stabilized buildings have that issue of fire and yeah. 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 So I think there can be like a tenant protection and know your rights sort of around fires, safety, and then also it could mean as well, it could also be things around like health, like pests, rodents, and things like that too, your rights that you have, that the landlord should take care of those things.
That is amazing. And I believe there's also a bill in the city council. I believe it's sponsored by not, why am I saying? By Alexa or council member Carmen Littles. Not sure. Don't quote me on that, y'all. But there is a bill in the city council basically explaining, like if there was a fire in your apartment, what rights to give. Like I believe the landlord is mandatory to give tenants like a list of what they can and their rights to come in. So yeah, definitely we'll love that as a presentation. We could definitely work on that. And then the last one is to invite any developers on any housing that's getting built in the neighborhood to come out and give a presentation on what they plan to do. And just give them like, ask any developers to just come and speak to us on the type of housing they're building, what they're building, how can we get involved, what do you need from us, how can we bring this information to the public. And then I don't know if this is like, for instance, like an example would be the Sterling Group. I don't know if anyone has been kept in the loop, but it has been a few weeks. On September 13th, 7 Sunset Park buildings, which is rent stabilized, has been bought for $20 million on 60th Street. So maybe we could bring that type of group, 61st, between 4th and 5th, and invite that type of group to come in and discuss what their plans is for 7 buildings. Yeah, they're not coming, but it's, an example of, we should be calling for these developers. You're coming into our community, buying our community, but what do you have plans for these 7 buildings you bought? And to know that this is big money that we're talking about, $20 million to buy out buildings in our community. And it's like, what do they have plans for these rent stabilized buildings? Do they want to keep the tenants there? Do they have other visions for this land in the future? and it's all about land. It's like, it's like basically, you know, monopoly. I think we made that joke in last meeting about Queen's Monopoly. The Monopoly game is actually releasing a Queen's version, talking about all of the development, blah blah blah. But yeah.
Thank, 1 second, sorry.
Okay.
Are there any other points that you wanted to raise?
No,
Besides
that's
those
pretty
three?
much our three main points: two
Alright.
presentations and I guess like invitations.
Okay, thank you so much. And then, I'm sorry, Maria, I'm just gonna move things along. If this next table, if you can just quickly identify your three, agenda items that you'd like to focus on.
So we talked about the idea of having the elected officials come to CB7 to talk about their housing, the bills, and sort of what they see as housing priorities. Alexa has sort of a land use proposal priorities. It would be great for us to have a conversation with her about that. And then that sort of reflects this idea that John brought up of setting priorities and values for the housing committee around, housing and how we see things and kind of getting in line together so that we have a better sense of like how we can move forward and how we engage then with the community, but then also with elected officials. And then also we brought up possibility of having Fifth Avenue Committee and 50th and the 4th Avenue project, which is the Diocese of Long Island, come to talk to the Housing Committee about their finances, their project, how kind of the nuts and bolts of these projects. And yeah, is there anything else specifically about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about Karen was talking about Mitchellama housing and different development opportunities, including in publicly owned controlled spaces. So I think having elected officials here, you could talk to a lot of different issues in one meeting. You could at least start a conversation about many different issues, including those, and having them discuss from their vantage point what's worth talking about and what's worth discussing. One other thing I would add quickly is I think we could also invite local housing organizations like Neighbors Helping Neighbors and other people who are doing frontline work and have been doing this work for a long time to come to the board and talk about what they are seeing in terms of issues like tenant harassment, the quality of landlords in the neighborhood, just what they're seeing on the ground and how they view housing issues could be another opportunity for a meeting. So those were a couple of the priorities that we talked about.
Thank you. I'm gonna read through this. This is, I don't think anybody else can read what I wrote. So what we talked about was having sort of like a project that would run through the fall of putting together a newsletter, maybe different series. We're really focusing on different issues that we can have in different languages and circulate to folks, talking about like redlining, AMI, tenant protections, and make it like really visual so folks, so that people who aren't in these meetings or who don't have time to attend the YouTube, like see the YouTube recording, they'll have something tangible and in hand to read through. And then we also talked about having a town hall on fire safety and then workshops on landlord issues and tenant protections. So a lot of it is overlapping. Oh, Pat? You can unmute yourself.
Hi, I just had a question and I'm listening to all of this. Are you suggesting presentations to the community board at large or presentations to invite the community, like a public hearing? And there was something else. I think that was it for now. Those are my questions.
Yeah, so this meeting is to build the agenda for upcoming housing committee meetings. So there would be public facing meetings.
Okay, because I heard like different things. I heard like inviting the elected officials. So again, it's like, is it just to to the community board for their knowledge first, or is it to make it like a public hearing?
Yeah.
Not so much a public hearing, but it would be open to, I mean, all the meetings are open, so it would be open to the community.
Yeah, I would just say for when our group talked about that, elected officials talking, I think, I don't know if you want to elaborate, but I think the idea was that it would be starting with the board and having this conversation, but then, you know, potentially moving on to being like, then having a more public facing event, so that, you know, it's about bringing awareness about what the board is doing, but then also what elected officials are doing.
That's how I understood it. And just one other thing, like fire safety, that's something that you may want to consider inviting the Public Safety Committee to be a part of. A lot of the ideas that you guys have, in my opinion, would involve having some of the other committees on board, and it'll give you more manpower. That's just a suggestion. Thank you.
Could I just add, based on what Pat just said, having this involve other committees as well. So she just talked about the Public Safety Committee, but what about also involving the Land Use Committee? I mean, these are all land use decisions as well. The Economic Development Committee, these involve economic development and who gets to live in the neighborhood, what gets built in the neighborhood. So I would encourage this committee to work with other committees to do joint meetings to bring people together to discuss these issues jointly, rather than it having be, you know, siloed, just like this is a housing issue, because it's a housing issue, it's a land use issue, it's an economic development issue, public safety issue, all of the above.
Exactly. Exactly.
Okay, so I don't know how to move forward from here. So we all have a lot of ideas. Do any committee members have any ideas on how we can move forward so that we can equitably vote, or not vote, but come to a decision on what our next steps are?
What if we were to ask people what they would like to work on specifically, and then we could, I mean, we could try to take a vote now on a specific thing to meet for October, or we can't take a vote, but we could try to come to an agreement saying like, this is what we would do in October, this is what we would do in November, or we could ask people to volunteer to see if, to do reaching out to different people and organizations on behalf of the committee and seeing what comes of that, and seeing what is feasible to do for October, what's feasible to do for November based on the feedback that they receive. So like if somebody's very interested in something.
Elise, did you have a comment you wanted to make? You wanted to share?
I was just thinking about what was what was common across. The voting could be based upon what seemed to be consistent across everyone's tables. So that's just one thought.
Yeah.
To guide prioritization.
Mhm.
Can our next meeting be with the other committees and start from there and bring them in and then see what comes out of that meeting with them? Because they might be able to give us a lot of information and direction.
Yeah, I mean, we can move forward in any way that folks want to. If we want our next meeting to be something, for example, like the fire safety town hall, we can definitely reach out to, you know, to that committee and see if they're interested, if they're available. I wouldn't expect for there to be any issue with that. So yeah, that's one direction that we can move in. Yeah, and I think, and John, just to speak to your point, I think that's what this exercise really was, like asking people like, what are they interested in working on? So yeah. Does anybody else want to share any other comment?
What if we were to try to agree on a few things to work on, and then people can volunteer to work on them, and then they can start to provide information to the committee about this is what I've done, and this is what's happened so far. So for example, elected officials meeting, like somebody could volunteer to say, I'll reach out to 5 elected officials and on behalf of the housing committee, and we would like you to come and present to us on your housing priorities, goals, legislation, etc. And then they could report back to the committee. This is what I've heard back. And so then you could see if that could be a feasible meeting to do in November, for example, or in October.
Yeah, we could do that. So like, let's just recap. Oh,
So we've tried this with elected officials before, to some success and some failure. It also depends on their schedule. To say October, I think would be impossible when we have an election just a few days after that. It's much easier to get the city elected officials because they're in the city. It's much more difficult to get the state or the federal. So you may want to not try to have a single forum for elected officials. You may want to work with them with their schedules to look at city housing issues or state housing issues or federal housing issues.
Yeah, no, I would say I would be interested in doing that, the elected officials and discussing sort of housing priorities and what they see. And I think it's interesting to try to do it like for the Assembly and State Senate, they're out of session until January. So I think the November, December timeline is actually pretty good because more of the elected officials are around and not up in Albany yet. So that makes it a little bit more. It is interesting because we haven't even really discussed, but like that Jeremy just brought up, the on the federal level, that is adds a whole nother layer of, but is actually really important. So it's interesting. I was thinking more city and state, but that's where a lot of, especially for, you know, public housing and affordable housing, is coming from HUD. So
Rare meeting, I want to share my opinions. I would always start with education. Try to get people on the same page, try to bring people up to a certain base level, and then other agenda items could flow from that. Perhaps everybody here knows it, for example, but might not be well known outside of this room. What is AMI? How does AMI impact affordable housing? Basic things like that to educate the public. And then you would have more buy-in from the public as people get up to a certain level of understanding, thank you, where they will bring additional issues.
Anybody want to speak to that comment?
I was gonna say, I think the education component is really important. I think it might actually be really great to combine it with having the elected officials talking about and being like, maybe us as a board actually does like a little bit of explainer about here's what some of the issues are, here how some things work, and then we're gonna hear from elected officials about what their priorities are to kind of set the table. Because I do think in some way like having elected officials there brings people, brings interest. They can also promote it. I think the tricky thing is really being like all this kind of wonky policy stuff. A lot of people are going to be like, I have no idea what this is. So having a draw and being able to have people be interested and being like, oh, I want to hear from Marcella. I want to hear from Alexa. I want to hear from electeds about what they have to say. And that and then also maybe investing in having, say, Neighbors Helping Neighbors or other groups that do this kind of housing work bring people as well. So that maybe there is one component where we can talk about the terms and different things that are important, but then maybe also they have 5 or 10, 15 minutes to talk about tenant organizing and the situation in Sunset Park. But just thinking about a way to make this impactful and to bring as many people as possible. And I know that like Neighbors Helping Neighbors has a lot of tenants who are dealing with, you know, distressed situations that would be interested and also want to hear from their electeds about certain things. So just thinking about ways to make sure that we could actually build this to be impactful, that bring as many people as possible outside. And I know it just is tricky at times. Like literally the city of yes CPC hearing was today, and there was maybe 20 people in the room. So this kind of policy wonk stuff does not bring a lot of people into the conversation. So we need to think about how to bring people.
No, I think that's an excellent point because it's like the real life stories that connect, really hit home. You know, so having maybe someone share their own personal story of what it was like to be, you know, evicted or have a fire in their apartment, or uh, how they are trying to negotiate rent with their landlord. You know, those kinds of real world stories are what make people, I think, resonate more than it's what we all live with versus the elected, you know, it may be more accessible. So maybe like maybe sometime in like in the December timeframe, we could have some kind of informational session. I think the educational component is vital. I mean, the AMI, it affects everything, you know, and I think so many people don't, I don't understand it, but it really affects, it drives displacement, and we all know that. So maybe like having some kind of set of the key things that we want to talk about, invite a couple of electeds, and then maybe like the community-based organizations that have the knowledge to speak about those, the real world. You know, Marcella has her own personal story of what it was like for her, you know, and speaking from the heart about what I think that connects with people more than, you know, what the legislation is in Albany, you know?
Hello? Okay. This topic brought to mind tonight for me was an experience we had on our blog. And if you knew what you were looking at, you knew what was happening on that property and how it might or not affect the next door building and up the block. Most of the people on my block had no idea what they were looking at. And it was organizing people to pick up a phone and call 311 and ask them certain questions about the type of what was going on with the construction, with the digging of the basement, how that was going to affect many people on that block if it went on and whatnot. It was an amazing amount of work and conversations because people that are intelligent, but they did not know exactly what was happening with that building and how much of the construction was illegal until they started calling and the work stopped. Not that it was perfect, but I was amazed how many people, by pointing out, you see this, this means that, they're looking at, I don't understand. And it took months to get people to, oh, now I understand. When I see that, that's what that represents. So that's the same thing with AMI. AMI is not just, AMI means area median income. No, what that number means, how it evolves, how it changes with time, how it changes with income, what type of, for the area. And that is, it's happening to you, but people don't know it, how it is affecting them individually. And that to me is criminal, that people are sitting in the middle of a crisis that is going to maybe evict them or maybe have to move out of a neighborhood, and it's happening around them, but they don't understand what they're hearing or what they're looking at. And I think we can do at least a better job than has been done of letting people know this has to do with you. It doesn't matter, if you just showed up in Sunset Park last year or you've been here for 40 years, everyone is going to affect everyone. And unfortunately, most of the people are going to be affected negatively.
Pat?
I just wanted to point out that you guys are thinking about doing these meetings November, December. It's the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas. Think about how many people do you really think are going to want to come to these meetings during the holidays? It's a busy time. So it's just an observation I just wanted to share. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone. So we're close to 8 o'clock, and just to really recap some of the key points that we've heard, it sounds like we really need to have a deep conversation about AMI and educational and really educating members of the board and the public about what that is and its impact on affordability. We also discussed having a fire safety town hall, a town hall with electeds, tenants' rights, a climate effects on housing. I really like the idea of having a town hall with electeds, but it feels like there's just um feels like the agenda is like jam packed for that. A lot of the times when we have these meetings, sometimes we try to fit too much and it goes over people's heads. I think if maybe we can commit to having like really short presentations, really do enough outreach, get the information out to people. That way, they have the opportunity to ask questions about, certain topics, and then we can lead off into a town hall where a lot of those points are reiterated but just so that people have like some foundational understanding together. But open to what folks, want to do. So one suggestion would be in October to have maybe 1 or 2 workshops focusing one on AMI, another on tenants' rights. And then maybe in November, having a town hall focusing on fire safety, and then leading off to a town hall with electeds. And then we can have other meetings like to plan, but sort of moving in that direction. And this is just a suggestion. Just throwing it out there. If you folks want to move in a different direction, if you want to end this meeting, have another meeting where we come back and plan it, I'm okay with that too. But just throwing that out there.
If we were to have another meeting, when could we have that? We'd have to see when people, okay. If we were to have, I think if we're having a meeting, is clarifying exactly what the meeting would be about. So like if we were having an educational meeting, who would present at that meeting? So if we were put that together, are we trying to get someone to present information such as AMI and others? And if so, who would that be? Do we know? Like, is there an obvious? Uh-huh. Right. Okay. So then, I wanted to add in because I just think for me a top priority has always been trying to learn about the economics of affordable housing creation. So I think there's an organization that has built affordable housing recently in the neighborhood. It's Fifth Avenue Committee. List of not everybody likes Fifth Avenue Committee, and that's totally fine. What we want to hear from them is how much their buildings cost, how they got the land. So how much their buildings cost, what the choices were in building that, where they got the financing. And if we could have that conversation, it would go a long way towards educating people about how you create affordable housing in the neighborhood. There's a merchant saying they've been asked for that, but I don't think the housing committee as a group has ever come to them and said, we as the housing committee would like you to come and present to us on the following topics. And if we did that, they might respond. Also, Ed, on a past meeting, she was asked about the finances and she said, get that information to you. I remember she said that. I don't think she ever did. Again, that was just sort of an off-the-cuff comment. It wasn't the housing committee as an organization actually going to Fifth Avenue Committee and saying, can you please educate the community about how you put up 110 units? So I think that's one of the most constructive near-term things we could do, and it could lead to a lot of other conversations.
Thank you, John. And we did have a meeting with the Fifth Avenue Committee a couple of years ago where they did present on some of their buildings. And I remember you had specifically asked them to dive deeper into the economics, and they weren't very forthcoming with that information. But I mean, if folks want, we can definitely re-invite them. I mean, it's whatever you all want, we can do.
I was gonna say, I don't know if it's gonna be really fruitful to ask them to come for a meeting if we have the same sort of back and forth and they don't answer questions. But I do think it might be worthwhile that if we want, we could present a resolution. Unfortunately, we don't have quorum, but to send a letter from the housing committee asking for that information again and being like, we want to be able to make that information public and would like a response from you. And I imagine we probably won't get anything, but I think it's still worthwhile to try. But I think at the end of the day, maybe proposing a meeting might not end up, like you said, we a couple years ago, and might not end up being that fruitful or providing more information.
So I work in affordable housing financing for HCC. So like, but I can't represent them. I can't give you, I have access to this information, but I can't present it. But I can help organize some of the educational stuff. Definitely AMI. I have a good idea how some of these projects were financed, definitely the library. So I can start building out some basic suggestions of like just the building pieces towards this. I would suggest so that we would need some basic civic education, such as like when people think of housing, we get all these inquiries from all sorts of places, but they don't see the differences being federal, the state, and the city. And I think people kind of need that idea to know for. So yeah, so that could be just kind of like basic civic education, and then built on know who HUD is. Now, when we explain what AMI is, we know they're the ones who set the AMI, not the city, not the state. So we have to work with their numbers. So this could be a thing that we can like build up from like a basic skeleton.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is for next month, we can work as a committee on a workshop on AMI education. And then I feel like that's really the only thing we've committed on. And then we can build up from there. Oh, Pat, put your hand up. Okay.
I do. I'm sorry. I'm using my phone. Is there any way that you guys can create a fact sheet with some of these definitions?
Yeah, Maria's saying that they already exist. But the problem, honestly, the problem is that we don't have, not a budget, but we don't have, I guess a way to really like publicly like make all of this information like stored in one way and make it publicly accessible. Like
It might be a good use of the CB7 news ticker if Jeremy agrees.
I think the website would be actually a great place for the housing committee to, host a lot of this information. But I know there's been some challenges with having that.
But if you take advantage of the news ticker, people will know to go
problem-
check out the website.
I agree. However, the website isn't updated. So a lot of times you have to dig through newsletters. It's really helpful to have all the information stored in one location.
Jeremy, are we able to use CB7 resources? Does CB7 have a Google account where we can do a shared Google Drive and post shared
As
material?
I've mentioned, it's legally dubious. We cannot give out board members' email addresses, so that would make their email addresses public. Also, conversations about issues are supposed to be held in public, so that would be self-selective.
Right, but does the board have a Google account that it can use to post material in a Google Drive folder? So that, and then that folder.
We have a Google account.
So if we wanted to use that account to create a folder and then put information in the folder, that folder could be linked to on the website, and then anybody could access anything the housing committee wanted to put into the folder. Is that right? Is there any?
You have to understand how that works. I don't understand that.
If okay, well, I think that I mean, this is a side comment, but I was going to suggest it later, but it's easy to share information online, including flyers, videos, anything you want. And the board has a Google account. The website is not updated. The city has not provided the board with an updated website, but it's easy to link to a folder. And then any information that people wanted to be accessible to the public could just be put in that folder, and then anyone could access it at any time. So I think that's one thing we could do, and I'm happy to help make that happen.
John, I would suggest you follow up with Jeremy directly on, to clear that stuff up. So I know we're past 8 o'clock. I want to be respectful of people's time. So I think what we're agreeing on for the next meeting is to host a workshop, public workshop on AMI and go through all of the intricacies of that. And then it'll lead to the town hall with electeds, and we'll sort of like build from there. It's not clear to me how we're gonna, like, what the next step would be, but I think we can all agree on hosting a next workshop on AMI. And the fire safety, our folks, okay. Yeah, no. And there's actually, when is, okay, so there's, Jeremy, where is that meeting held at? There's, okay, thank you, Jeremy. So it looks like we'll host a workshop on AMI and then another workshop, a town hall on fire safety that doesn't have to be here. We can have it, in a different space that's more accessible to folks in the community. We can take time to, we'll have another meeting just to hash out the AMI workshop and the fire safety workshop. And what we can do is break up into 2 groups. And if you're interested in planning out the details of AMI, we'll break up into 2 groups and you could get into the weeds of that. And then we'll have another group hashing out planning for the fire safety workshop, which would mostly be outreach and working through that. And then Maria, you have a question.
Kindly include public safety, please.
Somebody going to answer to Pat about include? Yeah, yes, Pat. You were heard and everyone said yes. Okay. Jeremy Lofer, is that space of the interim library available for a town hall or something like that, or that is out of the CB7's purview?
That doesn't belong to us. That belongs to NYPD. When we've tried to use it in the past, they have said no. They have plans for the space. They
Okay.
don't tell us what those plans are, but they have.
Meeting. Okay, fine. That's good to know. But maybe there's a way around it, maybe not, but it's sitting right there.
We also don't have a camera in there
Okay.
or a sound system.
Okay, all right. That's good to know. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so for this fall, we'll have 2 workshops, one focusing on AMI and another focusing on a fire safety town hall. I'll circle back and with a poll to see what dates work best for folks so we can meet to organize those. The next meeting to plan those 2 events. And then I guess we'll take it from there. John, I see you have your hand up.
I think AMI is very important, but it's in service of affordable housing creation, as far as I understand it. It's a metric that you use for affordable housing creation. So I would suggest that that meeting talk about more than just AMI, and also talks about it in the context of how it informs other conversations. And also, I see 2 people are leaving. I just had a logistical point that I think is incredibly important. Jeremy, if you're still around, I would just, I know you, yeah. No, this is just my, I would like to create a couple of resources for people. I would like to create a shared document that anybody here who wants to be added to can edit, so they can put ideas and thoughts and see each other's ideas and thoughts. I would like to create a shared email group, a Google group, so that anybody can email each other and discuss things together. And I'm available to create a shared drive folder with the board, but if the board can't do it, then I can create one and people can have access to that. So I just wanted to put that out there and see, Antoinette had emailed everyone earlier today if there's anybody who wants to be added to that, or if people would like to be added to that so that people can communicate with each other between now and, in an ongoing basis. Is there any?
Thank you so much. And look, I know everyone is really concerned about everything that's going on in the community. It's a lot. But I just want to be clear, like, and be honest. There's only so much that this committee could do. If you are interested in a particular topic and you feel like this committee is not moving fast enough, please talk to your neighbors, organize. There is no way that this committee is going to tackle everything. We've been sitting here for over 2 hours and we planned 2 workshops that we have to meet again to really get into the weeds of. Organizing and planning takes a lot of work, and this is all volunteer. I really have a lot of respect and admiration that you all sat here for over 2 hours on a Wednesday night, and I just want to acknowledge that. If you're interested in other topics, if you have the time to invest in it, please talk to other folks. But I do want to acknowledge the time that you had here. We really appreciate. So yeah, I just wanted to leave with that. Thank you again. I'm going to circle back to everyone who attended today to see our next meeting. It's gonna be just like what's it called? A working meeting. So if you feel like AMI isn't enough, that's fine. Bring it to the next meeting. You'll be able to hash out the agenda there, invite talk about which speakers you want to invite and so on. So just want to leave it at that. I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a good night. Thank you.